Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Hi, Loretta. I'm so excited to be interviewing you. I wanted to kind of talk to you about how did you get started with writing? How did you become interested in it? And where did your love for it grow?
Sure. Well, I think most writers start off as readers, just loving stories. And so for some people, that's okay. You know, they just want to be a reader their whole life. Great. But for some people, after a while, they think, well, I have a story to tell, and I want to tell it. And I want to use, I want to write a book. Most people stop there. Um, it's hard. It's hard to get started. So you have to get from, I don't know what I'm doing, this isn't going to work out, forget it, to I don't know what I'm doing, but I can learn. And it's hard to get there. But what you have to do is you have to start by saying yes to yourself. It's so easy to say no, right? Like paraphrasing Lady Gaga. There's a million reasons, right, that we can't do something. You can say, I don't have the time, or I'm never going to be as good as the people I admire, or only wealthy, people who come from wealthy families or good, fancy colleges can be writers, and that's, it's not true. But you have to get to the point where you say yes to yourself. You say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start, and I'm just going to start writing and see what happens. And that's what I did. And when you start off, you are terrible. Okay, you're bad. And that's normal. It's part of the process. Okay, and then you start writing stories that sound very much like the authors you like. Okay, and a lot of people get discouraged then because they're like, oh, I'm just a hack. I'm copying people. That's also part of the process. Because if you keep doing it, eventually your voice filters in. And then it starts sounding like you. And then you figure out what your voice is and who you are and the stories you want to tell. And you gain the confidence to then write a book.
Was there a certain book that really inspired you to start writing, like either in childhood or in adulthood? Was there a certain book?
Sure. I mean, there were lots. When I was a kid, it was Nancy Drew. I love Nancy Drew. I read I don't know how many, 100 and something, obsessively. And then I was a huge John Irving fan. The World According to Garp. I don't know if you guys know that book. I was obsessed with it, and when I started writing, I sounded exactly like John Irving for a while. So that book really struck me, and I liked it because it was so interesting and so human. And I like characters that reflect real people. What people really want. I don't have much interest in, like, as far as movies go, like, I don't have a lot of interest in superhero movies. Like, I like real people who are struggling with real problems, and that book just hit me as being so human.
And so, how did you start writing your first book? And where did the idea come from?
Okay, I'm thinking back. So interestingly, so when my youngest went to school, that's when I had that kind of moment where I said, either you do this or you don't. And then I wrote a book, kind of just a young adult book. And I wasn't thinking about it that much. It was just kind of writing it. I didn't really know what I was doing. And when I finished, I sent it out to agents and got some interest. Okay, that book didn't sell. It wasn't that good. Okay, it shouldn't have sold. But the agent saw something there. And then I started to get serious about it. And then I wrote another book for young adults. I was driving I used to teach at DeVry, and I was driving through Logan Square. And I was driving down the boulevard, and I was like, ooh, it was October, Halloween, and I thought, if witches lived in Chicago, they would live here. And so then I wrote a story about a witch who lived in Chicago, and HarperCollins picked it up.
Okay.
But while I was waiting, see, when your agent submits your book to publishers, you can wait a really long time. And it's nerve-wracking, and you're wondering every day, like, is my life going to change or not? And then 6 months later, you just don't care anymore. And then 8 months later, you might hear, oh, yeah, they want to publish it. So at that time, this was years ago when blogs were really big, I connected with another writer online. And she had her book on submission too. And she said, while we're waiting, let's do something together. I'm going to send something to you. If you want to respond to it, respond. See what happens. So she sent me a letter written by a woman on the home front during World War II. And my character, this doesn't happen very often, but my character to write back to her just showed up, like fully formed, like sat down, like, let me tell you my story. And so I wrote back to her, and so we wrote in character, didn't break character, for about 10 letters. And then we said, well, what are we doing? We showed our agents, and they said, keep going. Whatever this is, keep going. We finished it. It took us 6 months to write it. Not even. We started on Valentine's Day, 2011. We finished on the 4th of July. Had a little editing to do, and by Labor Day, it was sold. And so that was probably the most gratifying creative experience of my life. And those letters were flying. We were crying. And we never shared where we were going. We kind of decided a couple major plot points, but we never really shared. So it was like a natural reaction. And so that was amazing. So that was technically my first book, that Homefront Girls there. That came out in 2013.
And let's just kind of rewind a little bit.
Sure.
And you and I have talked about this. How do you get an agent? For those who are interested in writing in the audience or
Sure.
aspiring authors, how do you get an agent?
Sure. It's a lot harder now, I'm not going to lie, than when I started out. But when you've got a book that's ready to go, and it has to be ready to go, as perfect as you can get it, you write what's called a query letter. And it's a letter where you introduce your work and you introduce yourself, and you hope that someone bites, and you have to send out a lot. I was pretty lucky the first round. I didn't have to send out a lot. I'm on my second agent, though. Second time around, I had already had a track record. It was a little bit of a different experience. So the more experienced you get and the more books you publish, it doesn't get easier, but there are more doors that are open. Okay, but if you're just starting out, you should expect to send at least 100 letters out, minimum.
And how does it feel to get a rejection letter from a publishing house? And how do you deal with it?
Really crappy. It's my skin is so thick now. I mean, I could play dodgeball. Could just. When I started off, at first I was devastated, but you have to have just a core belief in yourself. It helps to be friends with other writers, because if you're a writer, you're going to be rejected. That's just it.
That's
right?
the truth of the business.
Absolutely, right? So I had some friends who were writers who were, we could commiserate because everyone was getting rejected. But it only takes one yes, and you just kind of wait for that yes. But yeah, it stinks because rejection happens through the entire process. It's not just in the beginning. So you'll get rejected by publishers, okay? And then you're going to get an editorial letter from your editor, and that's basically a letter that says everything they want changed in your book. And it hurts, right? Because it's like, oh, you didn't like that? Oh, I really like that. And they're usually right. And even though you don't want to admit it, they usually are. So you're getting some rejection there and some rethinking of things. And then you have to deal with the marketing team at the publishing house, who might like you, who might not like you, who there's all kinds of stuff there. They might reject you, and then you're like, oh, I'm in trouble, now I have to market myself. Luckily, that didn't really happen with me, but I know plenty of authors that's happened to. And then your book comes out, and there's going to be someone who, like, the first day the book comes out, slaps a 1-star review on Amazon. And you're like, oh, really? Like, you couldn't wait a week? So you're going to get rejection. There'll be 100 people who are like, oh, I love this book so much. It's that one person that, I've gotten my share of bad reviews, for sure. So you need to get used to that, and you need to just think, you know what, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Not everyone's going to like it, so, but I like what I did. I'm proud of what I did, and that kind of sustains you.
And it's hard sometimes because there are a lot of people that don't believe in you, that don't believe that you could do this, that don't believe that you're good enough, and that's hard sometimes. And they try to make you feel bad about yourself. And I think you and I have talked about that it's hard sometimes to deal with that, but you have to just believe in yourself, believe in your vision, and know what you want to do.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that, we're not just static. We're not, like, you're always going to get better. Mm-hmm. So even if, someone says, oh, it's not so great now, it could be, definitely. You put the work in, you're going to get better. I definitely am not a perfect writer, and I feel like I get better the more I write, the better I get. You kind of always think, well, that next book is going to be even better. That next book is going to be better. You kind of have to think that, right? Um, so yeah, you also get really good at tuning those voices out.
And I also heard from another author friend that if a story is meant to be read or meant to be published, it will be published. Like Harry Potter was meant to be read. It was, no matter how many rejection letters J.K. Rowling got, it was meant to be read and published.
Yes, and she got a bunch.
A lot.
Right. I mean, everybody, Stephen King, everybody has been rejected and has gotten discouraged, right? But yeah, I believe that too. And people get really hung up on, well, what's the trend? I should write like this person. I should write a good story. If you write a good story, it doesn't matter if, space aliens are in vogue. It'll get published.
And I love all of your books have such relatable characters. So do you
you.
get your characters from life experience or friends? I know the book that I'm reading right now is about a woman in her 30s who's single. I asked you before this started, do you know this from life experience? So kind of, why don't you tell me about that?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I never steal. I would never, if Lorena tells me a story, I'm not going to be like, ooh, I'm going to put that into my book. I would never do that. To me, that's immoral, unethical. Things filter in, though, right? And, well, okay, I'll tell you about Digging In, the book that I brought with me. So I was under contract, okay, and I noticed, so about 15 years ago now, a long time ago, there was an article in the paper in the local paper, about this Brookfield woman who was working for the Tribune. And she was in the marketing department, and she saw the writing on the wall that she was going to get let go. And she was, middle-aged, and she was worried. And she just kind of, something possessed her, and she quit before they fired her. And she dug up her backyard and planted vegetables and then sold tickets to people to come and get vegetables all through the summer. And she made enough money that she could kind of figure out what she wanted to do next. And I thought, okay, that's cool, right? That's awesome. So that's kind of sitting in my brain for many, many years. Then I started to notice that my friends who were in their 40s, women, were starting to have some trouble at work. And that they were being maybe ignored, passed over, not listened to, felt invisible, and that was kind of percolating. And so I came up with the story of this woman who is having a hard time at her job. Her life's kind of falling apart. She's getting a divorce. And she, one kind of night after she has a few too many glasses of wine, starts digging up her backyard, and it causes all of this chain reaction of events. So I'm, working on the book. It's about 30,000 words in, which is a little less than half. And my husband of 18 years goes out to play a round of golf and has a heart attack and dies. Okay, sudden, I was 45, he was 45, 2 young boys. Okay, it destroyed me. Okay, couldn't do anything. I was under contract, still had a book, and my publisher was being super nice. And she was, don't worry about it, take your time. Okay, but you're still under contract, and you don't get your second payment until you deliver your book, which I needed. So I didn't know what to do. I was distraught. So about 5 months after my husband died, I was in a bookstore, and I ran into a writer that I knew. And she said, oh, how you doing? And I said, crappy. And she said, how's the writing going? And I said, it's not. I can't put my brain there. And she said, it's because you only have one story in your head, and you need to write that. And so I went home, it was like she had turned on the faucet. And this is the book, and there's elements from the first book, but Paige, the main character here, is a widow. She's not me, okay? But, when they say writers, they say write what you know. They don't mean literally. It's emotional truth. Write what you know emotionally. And so I knew that. So it came out, and I delivered it to my publisher, and my editor said, and you wait for the editorial letter, which I've gotten doozies. And she said, yeah, I'm not going to change anything here. There's some, there were a couple things. She's like, yeah, this is good to go, which has never happened since. Um, but yeah, and that's the one that ended up selling a lot of copies, like 200,000 copies. So, um, so that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, has there been a lot of people who have reached out to you that had said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can relate to this," or "I can agree with this character"?
Absolutely, yeah. And that was, I had a number of widows groups reach out to me. So that was really intense. I do a lot of book clubs. So I've spoken at over 100 book clubs. And a lot of book clubs reached out to me because they had older members. I mean, it's unusual to be widowed at 45, but they had older members who, could relate to it and wanted to have the book club talk about what that meant to be a widow.
And there are moments like that when you are an author that are they mean a lot. It all of the messiness that you have to go through, the rejections, it makes it worth it. And there's a lot of fun things you can do as an author. Is there you get to go to different, I think it's book cons and different book signings. What kind of fun things have you gotten to do as an author?
I've done a little bit of that. You go and you have signings and things like that, and you feel very important. It's super fun. I've done that. I've done book clubs. I've done one interesting thing with Homefront Girls, which had me shaking in my shoes. A book club asked me to speak, and the members were all in their 80s and 90s and had lived through World War II.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, oh boy, what if I show up and you got this all wrong? This is terrible. But it didn't go that way. It was fine. But that was really fun because then they got to share their memories with me. And I'm a history girl, so I just loved hearing it. And so that felt like a privilege. And so that was really fun.
Have you ever had an author moment where you were like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is real life. I'm living my dream, and I've made it. And what was that moment?
I think I went for Homefront Girls. I went to Book Expo America, and I was signing, and then another author came next to me to also sign, same row as me, and it was Jim Carrey.
Wow.
And I was
what was he like?
Oh, he was very nice.
Yeah,
yeah.
funny.
And I felt pretty cool. Yeah.
How many books have you published?
7.
Okay. And how do you work on a computer all day at Triton and then go home and then work on a computer again? What do you do?
It's hard, not gonna lie, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I use something, it's old school, but I use the Pomodoro method. And it's that those of us of a certain age remember in kitchens those tomato timers. Do you remember those? Okay, so that's why it's called Pomodoro for tomato. I set it for 25 minutes, and I tell myself, you don't get to do anything else. No dishes, no scrolling, nothing. You're writing. You can do anything for 25 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So I do that, and sometimes, it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But I know that I have that to fall back on. Also, writers generally work. We work by word count. So, a book is, say, 75,000 words or something. You decide how many words you can realistically do a day, and you set a word count goal. So I might set a word count goal for 500 words, which is on the low side, but that's all I can manage, right? So I know that I'm going to be typing until I hit 500 words. And some of those words might not be good words, but some of them will be. Some of it will be usable. Sometimes all of it's usable. But we set word count goals, and it keeps us honest.
Okay. And do you have a certain writing process? I know Adriana Trigiani wakes up at 3 a.m., lights a candle. She has this long writing process. Do you have a certain writing process that you use?
I know certain things I need. Like I need caffeine. I like green tea. Mm-hmm. I drink it every day. I like that. I never really developed anything special because I spent a lot of time writing when my boys were young enough that, Mom, it was like, okay, I have 15 minutes, or whatever. But no, I don't write with music, though. I know a lot of people do. I can't because it starts to compete, especially with lyrics, because then I'm into that story, and I can't get into my own. So it's more what I don't do. I don't do noise. I need quiet.
Okay. And what are you currently working on right now?
So I so
What
I
can you
kind
tell us?
I don't want to jinx it. Well, I'm writing. I want to get back to historical fiction. After Homefront Girls, I wrote with the other author. We wrote a book set in the 1920s. It's called Empire Girls, but that was back in 2014. It's been a while since I've done historical. I love it. So I'm working on a murder mystery set in Chicago in 1966. It was a really interesting summer. It was a little bit messy. That's what I'm working on. I'm also kind of just as a fun thing. I wrote a Hallmark Christmas movie, and got a manager in Hollywood, and so of course I finished it right when the writer's strike started. So, sorry, what a mess. So she's just kind of shopping that around, and then I'm almost done with the second one, and that's just for fun.
Well, have any of your books, have you wanted to turn them into movies? Have you had that opportunity?
Lifetime came sniffing around, digging in.
Okay.
But like most things in Hollywood, it didn't work out.
It didn't work out.
The production company for Lifetime wanted to option digging in.
And how does that, do they reach out to your agent?
They
How
reach
does
out
that
to your
work?
agent.
Okay.
Yeah. They have scouts that go and read books and try to say, oh, this would be good for us. This would be, and then then they reach out to your agent. And so some of the books up there, I added a few that are in another language. So when you sell a book, sometimes if you're lucky, your agency has a foreign rights agent, and so they can sell your book to other countries, and it's easy money. You do nothing. They write you a check, and they translate it. You hope that they do a good job. I mean, that's Estonian up at the top. I have no idea, what that's about. I got so the French one is Homefront Girls. It's a different title. They usually retitle it. That's in French, and then German. That's Digging In. That's the German version of Digging In. I don't know what the translation. I can't remember what the translation is, but I've been published in Estonia, Germany, Italy, France, and then when you originally sell, you sell World English, so United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia.
Since your books have such a large reach, have you been able to travel and to promote your books?
I wish. No.
Okay.
Maybe if I was Stephen King or Nora Roberts and had that kind of income, but yeah, no. I wish. Yeah, especially France, because it did pretty well, and it got into a book club in France, apparently. So you don't hear much after you kind of sell it to another country.
Okay, and I feel like when you watch movies and you watch TV shows, they make a writer's life very glamorous. That they, you wake up and you have your coffee and you sit and you write, and then you go out to like the cafe. Or is it really like that, or what's a true life of an author?
Most writers have day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of it, because it's sporadic income. You never know. If your book earns out, which means if you earn back your advance, you start getting checks, which is nice, but you don't know often when those are going to come. So most writers have day jobs and are just kind of rushing around. It's not glamorous.
It's hard, and you're basically like a starving artist in a way, that you're trying to work on your craft and then also you need an income, and I could understand that.
Right.
Do you have a certain book that is your favorite out of all the books that you've published?
That's a good question. I think I like the one that you're reading now. It's not up there. It's called All the Good Parts.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2016. And that was the first book that I sold after writing with a partner.
Okay.
And I think maybe that's why. But it also, I like quirky stories, and that's, I think, my quirkiest as far as the characters. And all my characters feel real to me, but I just had a soft heart for that crowd.
What do you think about that book stood out?
I think the development of the idea, it came almost from anger, which is rare for me. I'm not a very angry person. And we were talking before, like I have friends who were in their 30s and getting so much pressure. And, everywhere it seemed like, to get married, to have kids, to, in the media, it seemed like everywhere a woman would turn at that age, she was told she was doing something wrong. Oh, you're putting your dishes in the dishwasher wrong. You're making your pancakes wrong, And I started to get offended on behalf of women of that, in their 30s. And so then I decided that this woman would be what people would consider, kind of a loser. She's living in her sister's basement. She's back at school, but she's not, done. She never finished her college degree. And she decides that she wants to have a child. And, everyone's kind of against her and, not very encouraging. And she has to find the strength within herself to seek out her dreams. And so I liked that. And Leona's the character, and I felt like she was a very kindred spirit, because I feel like I was definitely a late bloomer. My first book wasn't published till I was 43. So, I can really relate to that.
Okay, because it also, a lot of authors get published when they're in their 20s or right out of college. So what is the norm? Do most authors is it a wide variety?
I think it's now, yes. Especially when people are deciding to self-publish, which I never wanted to self-publish because I'm just not good at marketing. I'm bad at it. So I need someone to do that for me. But people who are good at it, if you self-publish, your book could do as well as a traditionally published book, for sure. I mean, the top seller of the past couple of years has been Colleen Hoover, and she started off as a self-published author.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And she got picked up on TikTok, BookTok, and
okay,
she's taken over publishing. There are people who have very nice homes in the Hamptons now because of Colleen Hoover.
Wow.
So it can be done, for sure. So that, I think, takes some of the ageism out of it, because you can control the trajectory of your career if you're self-publishing.
Do you feel like, I know you and I have talked about this, that books for middle grade have become really popular? Do you feel like there's a certain genre that's really popular right now? And I know, are you writing a middle grade novel?
I have kind of toyed around with writing middle. I don't know if I'm the right person to do that, and I have to kind of be okay with that. But yes, middle grade is in demand, because there's not a lot for kids who are 9, 10, 11, years old. Kids tend to read up. That's kind of the rule of thumb. If you're 13, you're reading books about 16-year-olds. Okay, but when the beautiful thing about Harry Potter is that the books followed his age, and each was age appropriate for the age Harry was at, and that was great. So you had 13-year-olds reading about a 13-year-old because the story was so good. I think we need more of that, and I think publishing is desperate for more of that. Yeah, so write that middle grade book you've been thinking about,
Okay.
Marianne.
I'll try. Where do you get your ideas from? For middle grade, or you write mostly chick lit? Is that your genre?
Women's fiction.
Women's fiction. Okay.
But I'm like not done with it, but I want to try something different. And where do ideas come from? You don't know. They just do. There's not. Stephen King always says Walmart. There's no good answer for it, and that's why. So yeah, and when you're thinking of an idea, I think part of the development of a writer is you can recognize the difference between a situation and a story, because they're different. And I think that's part of the development of an idea. And just to give a quick example, I don't know how we're doing on time, but so over Christmas, I saw Die Hard for the first time. I'd never seen it before, which my husband found, he couldn't believe it. And so it's a really good, so a situation would be, there's a guy in a high rise, and it's Christmas time, and he walks into a terrorist attack, right? Okay, that's a situation. Is it interesting? Yeah, it could be, right? Okay, but then his wife is working in the office, and he's estranged from her, okay? And he still loves her, and he wants to prove himself to her. So that gives him the impetus, right, to fight the terrorists. He's also a cop, so it's in his heart to fight, right? He's also got kids at home. Okay, he wants to make it home for Christmas. right? So now you've got a story. So there's a difference there. So that adds to the development of the idea and the development of your character.
Do you
Does-
write an outline before you start writing?
Sometimes.
Okay.
So there's two different types of writers, which I'm sure you know. There's plotters and pantsers. Plotters are the people who outline everything. Pantsers are the people who write by the seat of their pants. They kind of just go, where's this going to take me? I'm kind of in between. I need to know the first line and how it starts, and I need to know the last chapter and how it ends. And how I get there is a little loosey-goosey, but I need to know that going in. It's easier to do something if you know what the end is, right? So that's how I work. But I know there are people who, to use J.K. Rowling again, if you've ever seen her outlines, they're intense. She knew everything that was going to happen in all the Harry Potter books because she had planned it out. Stephen King tends to he polishes off 2,000 or 3,000 words a day, and he just kind of goes where the story takes him. If you do that, you need to know your characters really well in order to do that. So I'm kind of in between. But they both have positives and negatives.
I've heard that when you're writing a character, you really have to know, like you're saying, Stephen King really knows his characters. Do you have to kind of think about all angles of your character, like the psychology of, do they have any mental illnesses? What are their phobias? What do they like? Do you do that with your characters? Do you know them that well? Or
You
you
have
create
to.
them that well?
You can't be a good writer without knowing that.
Okay.
It sounds a little woo-woo, but they become real people. They have to be.
Okay.
Real people. You have to know, like for Homefront Girls, it was a 41-year-old woman in 1942. Okay, I got so many Women's Day, Better Homes and Gardens magazines from the time. I knew what kind of lipstick she would wear. I knew what she would have for breakfast. I knew, everything. Because then it frees you up to write. Because then you know where your character is going to go because you know them so well. It's like, in real life, like, if you have a partner, if you have a best friend, you know them so well. You know just by looking at them what they're going to think about a certain situation or because you know them. So when you know a character that well, then it helps guide the book.
Because sometimes when I'm writing, I have trouble coming up with, because you have to make your book. How many pages would you say a book would have to be?
It's more word count, and it's about 75.
70
to 80, yeah.
So that I always have trouble coming up with scenes to fill up a whole book. Like I know exactly how I want it to start, and I know certain scenes of what I want to happen, but filling up all that extra space, that's what I always struggle with.
That's one of those obstacles that doesn't need to be an obstacle. Get it out. If it's 40,000 words, it's 40,000 words. Then you read it through and you'll see all the bare spots. You'll see all the places where you rushed, all the places where you didn't tell the story in a way that the person could follow it clearly. I know a lot of writers who write like that. Their first draft is only 20, 30, 40,000 words. And then you start to fill in the gaps. It's just getting over the hump of getting it down on paper.
Do you ever have writer's block? Do you ever
sure.
have that trouble? And then what do you do to overcome it?
Writer's block usually comes when you're exhausted, when you're tired and your brain just isn't working well. So or you've been in the same spot and you haven't interacted with people or nature. So I'll take a walk, I'll take a shower, I'll do something to get my body moving, and it usually gets my brain moving.
I've heard going for a walk outside always cures writer's block.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Okay. What are you currently reading something right now?
I'm reading a book that I got here at the library. I can't remember the exact title, but it's about adult women with ADHD. So that would be me. So that's what I'm reading right now.
And
I can't read fiction when I'm writing fiction.
Oh, okay. I've heard some writers read specifically in their genre while they're writing, so they can kind of go back and forth with that.
That's a nightmare for me because I don't want anybody else's words or thoughts to seep into mine. I have to shut that out. So I can't read any fiction when I'm writing.
Okay. Do you watch fiction movies or anything like that? Are you that strict?
No, yeah, I'll watch movies. I'm not much though. And some TV shows, but again, not much. I don't like competing narratives, especially since I have a job, I have a family, I have other things going on. There's enough in there. Like I don't need something else. But after I turn a book in, then yeah, I'll binge The Bachelor or something like that, just to, yeah, yeah.
And speaking of your job, you work here at Triton. How, does anything that happened at Triton ever flow into your books, or to go to an event at Triton and be like, oh, this could be a storyline or something like that?
That's kind of a dangerous question. No, I think I try to put a wall because, we hear stories all day. We hear stories, but I need to be respectful of that person. And my job, when my storytelling comes into play, when I help people set up their professional stories, their professional lives. That's wonderful. That's theirs. So I can kind of put the wall there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get in trouble. But you know what I do is I always borrow names. I always ask people beforehand, though. But like if someone has a name I like, I'll be like, can I use your name? And I just make sure the character doesn't look anything like them, doesn't act anything like them. But my books are populated with names of people from my real life.
Okay, and where do you get last names? Is it the same thing?
They usually are somewhat symbolic. I look up, I start looking up surnames. I know what ethnicity they are, so I'll start looking up surnames, and then they've always just kind of fallen into place. And I also want something like when you're picking a baby name, you want it to sound good together.
Like the name fits the personality of the person.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you mentor any authors yourself?
I have. I've done some writing coaching. When I work with authors, I like working with teens. I like working with high schoolers who are interested in writing because they're fun and they're not jaded and they're not, So I have one girl that I work with. She's currently a sophomore in high school. When she was in 8th grade, she wrote a fantasy novel that was amazing, and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, 13 years old. She writes 400-page, wonderful novel. So that was really fun to work with her. But yeah, I do it rarely, but I do it.
And what advice would you give to young people who want to be an author, or anybody who wants to become an author?
That the key to this whole thing is persistence. There's a phrase, it's button, chair, hand on keyboard. And that's the secret. Because you can talk yourself out of it so easily. So you need to have that belief in yourself and that strength. And that persistence is what will carry you through.
Okay. Do you feel like the writing kind of, because, people now are always on social media, people are always, binging shows. Do you feel like that the whole book industry is kind of not becoming as popular as it used to be, that people are not becoming as interested in reading?
Unfortunately, yeah. Book sales are down a bit. It's hard to keep someone's attention, especially, and teachers will say that it's hard to keep a kid's attention to watch a 3-minute video. They want 30 seconds. So what do we do? And that's decimating our brains. I mean, that's really doing a number on us, right? Because we have kids in the classroom who can't pay attention, right? So I think the way to combat that is to start with kids, and to, you had told me before this that your mom read to you. I read to my boys every night. I think that's so important. And then enforced reading time with kids. Sorry, no phone, half an hour, you're reading. I think we need to start doing that again. Because, and I think people need to do, dopamine fasts, where you put the phone away for a while, even like over the weekend. I'm not going to go on Twitter. I'm not going to go on Facebook. I'm not going to, and kind of try to reset your brain, because I noticed that with myself, that my attention span was just nothing. And then I decided I was going to read, there's a book that I like. So J.K. Rowling writes under Robert Galbraith. I don't know if you know those books.
Yes.
They're mysteries, but they're doorstops. They're 1,000 pages.
Okay.
So I decided I'm like, I need to read that and not do anything else. And it fixed so much.
Okay.
It doesn't take much to get back into that where you can give something sustained attention. But it's definitely something we need to, focus on as a society, I think.
Especially, I feel like people read a lot during the pandemic, but now that we're out of the pandemic, you still wonder, are people reading?
Right.
But
Right.
it seems like the industry is still thriving. It
Yeah,
seems
absolutely.
there's
Absolutely.
still a lot of books are becoming movies and becoming very
Right.
popular.
Right.
Um,
I think the shift will happen first with film because I think people are sick of slick superhero movies.
the
I
same type
mean,
of
I don't
movie.
even there's tons of them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Okay, but it seemed like we were being bombarded with that and then we weren't getting like the movies about families, the movie dramas, romantic comedies even. Those are kind of fallen off the face of the earth, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like I think that that's turning around.
Mhm.
And even looking at the Oscar list, there are two movies on there that strike me. American Fiction. Has anyone seen American Fiction? It's really good. And Past Lives.
Mhm.
And those were two movies that made the Best Picture list that were quiet, human. You were engaged throughout, but there were no shoot ups and superheroes and special effects. It was just real people
Mhm.
dealing with real things. And so I think we're hungry for that. And so I think things are kind of turning, and that'll filter into the book world too.
Okay. And this is going to be my last question. How does it feel being here today and, showcasing your work and your writing to the Triton College community and to your coworkers?
Oh, it feels great. I'm so grateful for everyone who came to hear me talk and talk.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I'm proud of it. It's a part of my life that I'm proud of. But I think the number one reason that I wanted to do this is so that anyone who is kind of thinking about maybe this is something I want to do, you can absolutely do this.
Mhm.
We all have stories to tell. We've all had interesting lives. And whether you want to write fiction or a memoir or something like that, and even if just your mom reads it and your boyfriend or something,
Mhm.
you've completed a book, and that's something to be proud of. And so I hope that, if anything, someone could walk away from this who was like on the fence or thinking maybe they wanted to do something creative like that, will feel empowered to do so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Loretta.
You're welcome.
Thank you.